Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining this linguistics subject admissions webinar. It's great to see you all here today, and thank you very much for joining. My name's Catriona, and I'm the School Liaison Officer at Downing College, and I've organised today's webinar for you. So why are we running this event? Well, we're running the event to let students know more about linguistics at Cambridge University, and hopefully some of you are interested in the course, and by the end of today you'll know more about how to apply and whether the course is right for you, and we hope that some of you will come and join us in the future. So what's going to happen today then is after my introduction, I'm going to hand over to our admissions tutor, Dr. Cameron Eunice, and he's going to talk over the admissions process if you want to apply to study at Cambridge. Then we're going to hand over to the Director of Studies for Linguistics, Professor Ian Roberts, who's going to give you a subject overview of the linguistics course. And then finally, we're going to hand over to Ilis, who's one of our current students, and she's going to talk about what student life is like being a linguistics student at Downing and at Cambridge. And then we will have a Q&A at the end with all the speakers. So a few things to remember, we are recording this session and we will make it available to you afterwards. So please don't worry if your internet cuts out or if you miss anything. And we're going to try and answer as many questions as we can in the Q&A, but to help us do this, please can you use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen rather than the chat box, and this way we can keep track of the questions that you're asking. So a brief introduction then, what is Downing College? So we're organising today's event, but who actually are we? So here's a picture of our site in the centre of Cambridge, and we're one of the 31 Cambridge colleges that makes up the University of Cambridge. And we were founded in 1800 by Sir George Downing, and we were the 17th college to be founded out of those 31. And we take around 120 new students each year for all subjects taught at the University of Cambridge. And importantly for today, that includes linguistics. So I'm now going to hand over to our admissions tutor, who's going to take you through the admissions process.
Thank you, Catriona. Good afternoon, everybody. Like Catriona has mentioned, my name is Cameron Eunice. I'm the admissions tutor at Downing College. I'm also a fellow at the college in chemical engineering, and I've been working here at the university for now nearly 16 years. So what I would like to do in this afternoon's talk is really cover some broad areas. And so the things I want to talk about in my talk is to tell you a little bit about the university in terms of what are the roles of the departments within the university, and how do the colleges work in synergy with those? I didn't do my undergrad at Cambridge, and when I first arrived here, one of the things I found quite difficult to get to grasp with is how does the departments work, and how do the colleges work, and how they end up complementing each other for undergraduate teaching. So I'll be telling a little bit about that. I'll then be talking a little bit about the admissions process, try and highlight the key stages involved in the admissions process and what to keep an eye on when you are preparing your application for the university. I'll also touch on a little bit of information about the admissions assessments, in particular for linguistics, and then try and provide some general advice on how to prepare a personal statement and what sort of things to look for when you are invited for an interview at the university. So a little bit about the university to start with. So if you were to join the university as an undergraduate student, you will be a member of the university as well as a member of the college. So what does the departments offer to students in terms of a service? So what you will find is when you join the university, you will be going to the department where all your lectures will be held, any kind of practicals or workshop sessions will be held. They will be responsible for setting the exams and the assessments. They'll be responsible for awarding your degrees and classifications of your degrees. And they're generally there to provide guidance and support to students about career prospects after you graduate. So effectively, the department's there to set the course content and actually set the whole program for the undergraduate course and assess and award you your degrees. So if the departments are doing that, what do the colleges do? So the colleges work in synergy with the department. So one of the things that you will find when you prepare your application to the university, that the very first thing you'll notice is that your application is reviewed by a college. So you end up applying either to a college directly, or if you have submitted an open application, your application will be allocated to a particular college. The college is there to assess the applicant, to review their application, and to make a decision about whether they should be offered a place to study at the university. So that's one of the major roles of the colleges, is involved in doing the undergraduate admissions process. But once you're at the college, the college is there to provide academic and pastoral care. So as on your first day of arriving to the university, when you arrive in your first year, you will notice that you've been assigned a director of studies, and the director of studies is there to provide advice and guidance about your academic program. So they'll be there throughout the whole period of your undergraduate course, advising you and keeping an eye on your progress through your academic course and making sure you're on track. So they'll be there to provide advice about what to do in preparing for your exams, making sure that all your supervision arrangements are arranged, and making sure that you are on track on your academic work and performing to a good standard on your coursework and exams and so forth. As well as that, you'll be assigned a personal tutor at the university. And what the personal tutor is there to do is provide support for non-academic matters. So for example, if you arrive to university and while studying at the university, you run into financial hardship, the tutor's there to help and support you through that. So you may be able to go and see a tutor, explain your situation to them, and they'll be able to advise what bursaries and hardship funds you can access to be able to support you financially. Another example of where a tutor is very, very important is basically you may run into issues with health, your personal health, which may have an impact on your work. And again, your tutor is there to support you through that and make sure that they liaise with the department to make sure that there is adequate allowances put in place for your medical needs. So a tutor is a very important part of a student's journey whilst they're at the university. They're there to support them and really represent them within the university and college. Other things that our colleges offer is a college nurse. So every college will have a college nurse, and they're there to provide medical advice to students, and they're there on site and available 5 days a week. And there is usually a clinic set up where students can go in and talk to a nurse in confidence. As well as that, every college has a chapel and a chaplain, and the chaplain is there really, again, to support the community body, and make sure that they have the relevant support and pastoral care that may be needed. At Downing, our chaplain organises every Thursday's sort of Keith's Cafe, where free donuts and coffee are offered outside on the college grounds. And it's a good opportunity for the whole undergraduate community to get together, to have a social, and have a drink, a coffee, a hot drink, and a donut together. So it's quite a sociable occasion within college. As well as the academic and pastoral care that the colleges offer, they provide all the accommodation, dining, and recreation facilities for students. So when you join a college, most colleges would provide accommodations for the first 3 years of your undergraduate, and most likely the accommodation will be within the college grounds. So they're there to provide all the facilities, such as your kitchen cooking facilities with some colleges, the laundry facilities, as well as your main dining hall, where there is sort of lunch and dinner served every day. And in some cases, they even serve breakfast. As well as that, all the colleges have their own sports facilities. So there will be all the sort of facilities made available for accessing your gym maybe on the college grounds, having access to sports facilities such as the cricket ground, football grounds, and so forth, which are all available to all colleges in Cambridge. Now, as well as providing sort of necessities such as accommodation, dining, and sort of sports and recreation facilities, the college also spends a fair bit of time supporting students with their academic learning. And as part of that, all colleges are organised small group teaching, which are known as supervisions. And these are basically an opportunity for students to come back to college and meet up with an academic on a one-to-one basis, or in groups of 2 or 3 small groups, to actually go over the lecture material that they have been learning about in the department. And the whole point of the small group supervisions is to try and make sure that whatever you have been learning about within the department can be reinforced, and make sure that you've understood the steps you need to take in preparing yourself for your assessments and your examinations for those subjects moving forward. And last but not least, every college will provide academic study spaces. So when you visit any of the college websites, you will see they all have their own libraries where the students have access to all the books that they need for their undergraduate course, as well as breakout spaces and quiet study spaces around the college grounds. So hopefully this now gives you an idea of what the college does, what sort of facilities and they provide, what kind of role they play for an undergraduate whilst they're here studying at the university, and how that then complements what the department offers to students. Now I'm going to move on and talk a little about the application process. There's a number of stages within the application process that I always advise students to think about. One of the first things is always to think about the course that you want to study at the university. At Cambridge, we offer over 31 different courses, which cover a broad range of subjects, more than 65 different subject areas. So it's important to think about what subject you want to study at higher education and really make sure it's the right choice for what you want to do. Now, all of you joining this webinar today are here for that very reason, to learn a little bit more about what linguistics is and what the university has to offer in terms of the undergraduate course for that. But do spend more time looking at the literature which is available within the university, all the resources which are available on the university website, college website, department website. And if you have any questions about the subjects, do get in touch with the colleges where you're thinking of applying to, and they should be able to help you with that. And another thing part of the application is thinking about which college you want to apply to. Now, many applicants spend long hours looking at statistics of how many applicants applied to a particular college for a particular subject, and use many different sort of guidelines to decide which college they want to apply to. I often get asked the question about which college, how should I choose a college? And my advice to anyone who's thinking about this is to actually have your own criteria of why you want to go and study at a particular college, and use that to make your decision. Now, that criteria could be its location. It could be it's very closely located to the department where you're going to be studying, which is a good enough reason. It could be because of the sports facilities that college has. It could be because you like the accommodation they have to offer. It could be because they have very good accommodation facilities. So use your own criteria to make a decision about where you want to apply to. At the end of the day, you're going to be spending 3 to 4 years studying at university and spending a large substantial amount of time at that college. It needs to be the right fit for you. So do your homework, do research all the colleges. In terms of academic experience, all the colleges provide the same level of support for students. And it's really down to a personal choice. So I would always advise a candidate to look at those sorts of criteria when choosing a college. Now, when you're preparing your application, you need to realize that the application deadlines are a lot more earlier, and any kind of registrations for any assessments needs to be done in advance as well. So for linguistics, there is a pre-admissions assessment, and you need to register for that in advance. So please do talk to your schools. They should be able to advise you about the deadlines for those, the dates that you need to register for them, and how to go about registering for any tests. However, if you're not too sure about this, get in touch with the college you're applying to. They should be able to advise, guide you on that as well. As well as making sure you register for any assessments, you also need to be aware that the UCAS deadline for Cambridge and Oxford is a lot earlier. It is the 15th of October. So make sure your application is sort of completed and prepared well in advance of that deadline. Now, once we receive your application, we generally get in touch with students to ask them to complete an additional questionnaire. Now, many students do get quite stressed about this and think this is another form of an assessment, but please let me reassure you that that is just an opportunity for us to gather more information about you. It's nothing to be stressed about, and just complete these questionnaires to your best of ability. The sort of things we're looking for information when we ask for these questionnaires to be completed are, for example, what topics you've covered so far in your A-level courses at school or college. And what that allows the interviewers to do, if you are invited for an interview, is to be able to review what you've learned so far and base their interview questions, academic questions, based on what you've learned so far at school. Other things in the additional questionnaire, we want to know about any kind of extenuating circumstances that may have affected your performance, your academic performance, and there's an opportunity for you to detail that in this additional questionnaire. Another thing which is very common that students would like to know and ask about is if there's an opportunity for them to submit a specific personal statement for their application to Cambridge, especially when you are applying for a course like linguistics, which is not on offer at many universities across the country. And you may be preparing the personal statement, which would be a generic one for all your applications for other universities, but you may want to have a specific one for your application to Cambridge. In the additional questionnaire, there will be an opportunity for you to be able to submit a Cambridge-specific personal statement if you wish to do so as well. Now, depending on the college you apply to, they may ask you to submit some written work. And this is really some coursework that you've done already at school that's been marked by a teacher, and it shows your competency in your writing skills. And so again, make sure you look up the information required by the college that you're applying to. And if there isn't a requirement for submitted written work, be aware of that and be prepared for that once you've submitted your application. Now, once we've reviewed your application, any kind of test scores and all the additional information, any submitted written work, we'd then be making a short list of candidates that we would wish to invite for an interview. And normally around the end of November, we'll be getting in touch with all the candidates to let them know when the interviews are going to be taking place, which normally take place within the first 2 weeks of December. After the interviews, we do review all of our applicants that we've interviewed. And then in January, by the middle of January, we will be making decisions about who will be made an offer from the university, and all our candidates will be hearing from us about the outcome of their application. So hopefully this gives you an overview of the various stages involved in preparing your application to the university and the key things to keep an eye out for when preparing your application. So what information do we use to assess your application? A lot of candidates ask this question, and a lot of people think, is it our written work that's given a lot of weighting? Is it how we perform at the interview that's given a lot of weighting? I'd like to emphasize there are a number of things we look at. We look at your academic track record. How have you performed so far in your exams at school? We also look at your personal statement. What sort of information you provided about yourself in your personal statement? We also look at your school teacher's reference and what they have to say about you as an individual, and more importantly, about you in terms of your academic performance. We'll also be looking at any test scores of any tests that you've sat. As well as that, if you've submitted any written work, we'll be going through your essays and evaluating them and being able to assess your writing skills, your communication skills through the written work that you submitted. And then if there are any extenuating circumstances that you have mentioned in your questionnaire, we will be taking that into consideration about making a decision about whether we want to review your application further. As well as that, we will also be looking at how you performed in the interview. And we'll be looking at all of this information collectively, all together, before making a decision about an application outcome. There is not one particular thing which has more weight than the other. All of these things are taken into consideration and looked at collectively before we come to a decision about a particular applicant. What are we looking for in an application? Now, this is something I can't emphasize enough. We are looking for academic ability and potential. We want to make sure that students that actually do come to study at the university are those which can keep up with the academic workload that the university expects from the students. So we want to make sure that you meet the subject requirements, but also how suitable are you to the course? Are you going to be able to keep up with the course content? Are you going to be able to keep up the workload? And those sorts of things really reflect through when we can be able to assess how genuinely interested you are in the subject. What is your motivation, your level of enthusiasm for the subject? So these are the sorts of things we look for when we are reviewing applications. What things don't have any relevance to our application is things like your school background and any kind of extracurricular activities that you're doing. If you play, I always use this example, if you play for the under-18s England football team, that's amazing and it's a fantastic achievement, but it will not have any relevance to your application to the university. We are only interested in academic content and academic ability of the candidates which are applying to us. So in terms of our standard conditional offer, you will notice on the university website that all arts and humanities subjects, the offer requirements is an A star and 2 A's. Depending on the college you apply to, There may be a subject requirement for a particular A-level. So do look at the individual college websites to make sure that you meet the entry requirements for that specific college. At Downing, we stick to the standard conditional offer of an A star and 2 A's, and any kind of requirements are detailed on our website for all the courses that people can apply for. The other thing is, if you are sitting IB, we typically would like to see a combined score of 41 to 43, and the candidates to score in their high level subjects at least a 7, 7, and a 6 in their high level subjects. If you're not doing A levels or IB, there is a lot more information available on the university website. Please do look at that resource there. It should be able to provide you information about the entry requirements for the qualifications you are studying right now. And if you're still unsure about whether the entry requirements and whether you meet the entry requirements, do get in touch with the college you're applying to, and they should be able to advise you and guide you on that matter. Now, moving on, like I mentioned, personal statements is preparing and writing a personal statement is an important part of your application. I always tell this to candidates, this is the first opportunity we get to actually assess you as an individual. So it's an opportunity for you to tell us about yourself and why you want to study that particular subject at university level. Personal statements are typically about 500 to 600 words, so they're quite short, and it takes a few iterations to get the balance right and to make sure that the key messages or the key points you want to reflect in your personal statement come across clearly. So do spend some time writing your personal statement. My advice is always to speak to your schools, who should be able to help and advise you on this, and also talk to your friends and your family. Get them to read your personal statement. Tell them to reflect on it and give you feedback about what they think of it. So the key things that you should always make sure that your personal statement includes is academic ability and potential. You need to be able to demonstrate those sorts of things within your personal statement. How motivated and suitable are you for the course? What is it, the key things that have driven your decision to apply for that course? And how in your commitment and self-discipline. Talk about examples of things you've done, which has helped you make an informed decision about the course you want to study at university. Talk about any literature that you've read around the subject and how that's inspired you into learning about the subject in more detail. So those are the sorts of things you need to make sure are reflected within your personal statement. I always advise students to do a lot of reading around their subject, and this is just really to provide you some further resources and just to kind of emphasize the fact that there's a huge bank of resources available online. Please do make sure you read around your subject area and look at literature which is published around your subject area to build up a broader understanding of your subject, and to be able to have a broader context around your subject area is always useful to have, especially when you're trying to make that decision about whether you really want to pursue that at a degree level. So just to summarize, a successful personal statement is one which provides specific evidence and examples of areas of interest and achievements. Now, one of the things that I sometimes come across when I read a personal statement is the student will list a number of bits of literature that they've read. And that's great to see that you've really read around the subject area and read lots of different types of literature, but that doesn't give me any insight about you as an individual. So what I would always suggest is pick 1 or 2 good examples of literature that you've read, talk about what is it that you've learned from that experience, and talk about how you've reflected on your, how that has reflected on your decision on applying to university in that subject area. So it's really thinking about the subject beyond the school curriculum in a more broader context, and seeing how you read around the subject and how that's come to allow you to make an informed decision about pursuing it at further education. Last thing I'd always point out is try and focus the main body of your personal statement on academic-based discussion. So 2/3 of your personal statement should generally cover a discussion which is around the subject you want to study at university, and actually do allow a small section at the end to talk about any other activities and interests and hobbies that you may have. All right, moving on to talk a little about the interview process. Now, as I mentioned, candidates will be informed whether they've been successful for an interview near the end of November. And normally in the letter, there will be information provided about the interview arrangements. You would typically have 2 interviews for your subject interviews, and they are typically around 20 to 30 minutes long. And at the interview, you would be sitting in front of 2 academics who will be having a discussion with you about an academic topic. So it's normally conducted by the fellows in the college in that subject area, or tutors or director studies in that subject area. And the whole conversation in your interview will be around predominantly academic and subject focused. So what to expect at the interview? So there could be a number of things that could happen during the interview. But all of them will be around academic discussion. So they may actually, depending on the subject you apply to, they may ask you to read a piece of text in the interview and then have a discussion around that text. They may actually pick out something that you've mentioned in your personal statement, maybe a piece of literature that you've mentioned in your personal statement, and have a much more detailed discussion around that subject with you in your interview. They may actually present you with some sort of prop, a picture of something, or a sculpture, or an object, and have a discussion around that. So it's all about giving you a question where they are trying to probe your logic that you take, the approach you take at having a discussion around that subject or solving the problem. So my advice to anyone who is actually giving an interview, first of all, is to always think out loud, because what we want to do is see how you are thinking through the problem. We're not really interested in, well, it's great to see someone get to the answer straight away, but we're more interested in the journey you take in actually getting to the answer to the problem that's been presented to you, your thought process behind it. So do think out loud. The other thing I always advise candidates is to ask questions if you're not too sure about what's been asked of you. So it's not a matter of, we ask you a question and you try and present us with an answer. Sometimes you're not quite clear about what's been asked of you. So don't feel hesitant about asking for clarification. And one of the last things I always say to candidates is that always reset after your first interview. You will have 2 interviews on the same day. And normally what happens is a candidate who's had a very good interview probably comes out feeling quite exhausted because they've been asked lots of questions, and the interview has been probing them further and further in the discussion. And usually they come out feeling quite tired and think that they've had a very, very difficult interview. And then are quite kind of worried about that interview and thinking about it too much before they walk into their second interview. So my advice to anyone is if you've had your first interview and you felt that it went horribly wrong, then the likelihood is it probably went quite well. And to forget all about it and start off fresh and give it your best again for your second interview. So hopefully this gives you some ideas about what sort of things happen in an interview. But if you want to find out more, there's lots of resources available on YouTube, on the university website, the university YouTube channel, sorry. And I do advise students to look at those videos. They actually do provide a very realistic representation of what actually happens in an interview. Okay, so just my last slide now. A lot of frequently asked questions are based around gap years. Do the university allow gap years? That's absolutely possible. If you are thinking of applying for deferred entry, we do allow that, and we would encourage students to make sure that they stipulate that on their application. And last but not least, extenuating circumstances. I'd just like to emphasize this point again, that it's really important that you do tell us about any kind of disruptions which have affected your academic work. It could be health reasons, it could be a family bereavement. We want to make sure we take that into account when reviewing your application. All right, so I hope you have been posting lots of questions on the Q&A, and near the end of the talks of this webinar, we will have a Q&A session where hopefully we can be answering more questions for you. But I'm just going to hand over to Ian now, who's going to tell you a little bit more about linguistics.
My name's Ian Roberts. I'm the Director of Studies for Linguistics at Downing, and actually also the Director of the Section for Theoretical and Applied Linguistics in the Faculty of Modern and Medieval Languages. So let me tell you a little bit about the Linguistics Tripos, the Linguistics degree program, first of all. There are three basic ways that you can study linguistics at Cambridge as an undergraduate. The principal one is on the actual linguistics tripos or linguistics degree, BA degree course. That's a 3-year course, and you concentrate essentially on the study of language in general. I'll say more about that later. The other alternative is to take the degree in modern and medieval languages, which involves a year abroad. So that's a 4-year course, and involves also a certain amount of study of literature, but also actually learning a language, or in fact, usually 2 modern European languages. The third possibility is to switch into linguistics in your 2nd or 3rd year, starting in some other subject. And there it could be modern languages or English or a Middle Eastern language, classics, or even a scientific subject. The linguistics course is a 3-year course. Basically, the first year is part 1. Most people do part 2A in the 2nd year and part 2B in the 3rd year. In part 1, there are 4 subjects that you have to study. At part 2A, you have to take 4 courses selected from a range of about 15 that are on offer in a year. And at part 2B, you take another 2 from that same set of 15, as well as 1 very general paper called Linguistic Theory, and you write a dissertation, a small research project. You have final exams at the end of each year. And actually, this slide is slightly out of date now. It says only the 3rd year currently counts for your degree. We will from next year move to a situation where 30% of your final degree mark will come from the 2nd year and 70% from the 3rd year. We have the academic year is divided into 3 terms, which have unusual names in Cambridge: the Michaelmas, Lent, and Easter terms. In part 1 linguistics, you will get 17 one-hour lectures over the course of the 3 terms and 3 one-hour tutorials or supervisions in groups of 6. These consist mostly of responding to problem sets or writing short essays. In part 2, each course consists of, again, 17 one-hour lectures, and you have 9 one-hour supervisions in much smaller groups, usually 2 or 3. You could even be on your own. Those supervisions mainly involve discussion of essays, and the supervisor may be a professor. The careers that people end up in linguistics are very much, well, to a certain degree, the typical kind of career opportunities that are open to anyone with a good humanities BA. But linguistics does give you some special skills. It's very much oriented towards training your skills in analytic reasoning and argumentation. And of course, you learn a lot about language and languages. There's a little list here of careers of past students. Computer industry is an obvious one. Speech recognition, artificial intelligence, etc. Companies like Google and Apple are generally quite interested in linguistics undergraduates. Speech therapy, another obvious one. Obviously, language teaching or education of various sorts. Interpreting, translating, and even espionage. That is actually something that we do have graduates who have gone into, and a range of other subjects. The structure of the course, as I said, in your first year, you'll have 4 obligatory courses. You don't really have any choice because we think that you have to get the basics before moving on to making choices. So the papers are paper 1, sounds and words. It's mainly about phonetics. The second, paper 2, is structures and meanings, about the structure of sentences and about semantics, the study of meaning. Paper 3, language, brain and society, is about psycholinguistics and sociolinguistics, which I'll say a bit more about later. And paper 4 is about the history and varieties of English. And in fact, there you have the opportunity to learn a little bit of Old English. As I said, in part 2A, there are 4 papers to be taken from a range of about 15, I'll say something about some of the subject matter of those papers in just a moment. And at part 2B, as I already mentioned, 2 more plus a compulsory general paper and a dissertation. As I mentioned, there is no year abroad associated with linguistics. A question that people often ask, because linguistics is not a school subject, is there any particular preparation or background required? Well, aside from the basic A-level requirements that Cameron talked about just now, we don't actually impose any particular subject requirement. Of course, having languages is good, but there are plenty of other subjects which can give you a good start in linguistics as well, including music, mathematics, philosophy, computer science, biology, physics, history. We look at any combination of A-levels in principle. Admissions, well, Cam has already gone over this, and especially since we lost some time, I'll skip over those slides. Linguistics is a subject which, because it studies language, and because language is so pervasive to all aspects of human life, actually makes connections across a very, very wide range of subjects. There are many connections with mathematics and computer science. There are connections, obviously, with the humanities disciplines, particularly languages themselves. There are connections with the social sciences. As I said, I'll say something in a few minutes about psycholinguistics and sociolinguistics. And there are some connections also with natural sciences, particularly in biology. So yeah, let me just say a few words briefly about certain aspects of the subject. Of course, this will just be a very quick overview, but hopefully it'll give you some idea of some of the things that we study when we study linguistics. So psycholinguistics is the area which is at the connection between psychology and linguistics. So we ask questions like concerning the nature of the connection between language and thought, or how children acquire language. So here's, or the study of language disorders, language pathology. Here's an example of some speech from someone who is suffering from a syndrome called Broca's aphasia. And as you can see, in attempting to describe a trip to the dentist, it's not very articulate. This is one type of speech disorder where people essentially lose all fluency, although they can actually basically express the meaning. So we have describing the trip to the dentist, the day, the time, and the doctors and teeth, which gives you the sort of absolute basics. But it's, as you can see, not exactly fluent. Another kind of aphasia is called Wernicke's aphasia, which is characterized by great fluency, but actually almost no meaning. So this is a Wernicke's aphasic describing a picture, saying, I can't tell you what that is, but I know what it is. I don't know where it is, but I don't know what's under. I know it's, I couldn't say what it is. I couldn't say what that is. That should be right in here. So very fluent, but actually meaningless. Broca and Wernicke were both 19th century psychologists and physiologists who looked at mainly stroke victims, people who'd had injuries to the brain. And the different aphasias are associated with damage to different areas of the brain. And these different areas in the brain seem to tell us something about the functioning of different aspects of language. So that's just a brief look at language pathology. Another very important area of psycholinguistics is first language acquisition, looking at how children learn their mother tongue. And here we see a fairly clear pattern. So at roughly 18 months, after learning a few basic words, which starts at about 9 or 10 months, children come up with what are called two-word sentences. So they're typically like this: daddy, shoe, all gone milk, hit doggy. And they never produce anything more than 2 words at a time. A little bit later, in the second, after the second birthday, they come up with longer sentences. But as you can maybe see, the sentences don't really have any grammatical information. It's just words: baby doll ride truck. So the verb doesn't have a tense. Or pig say oink. Again, the verb doesn't have a tense, and so on. And then after about 2.5, in the typical case, we find sentences which look really like adult sentences. So we see this progress during these early years of life. And then between the ages of 3 and 5, the average child is learning about 10 new words a day, which is a lot, 70 a week, 300 a month. And remember that the child doesn't have access to dictionaries or grammars. So it's rather different to learning the vocabulary of a foreign language, which you might have done in school. When your French teacher tells you that vache means cow, you already know what a cow is. But somehow children, when they learn the word cow, also learn what a cow is, which is a much more difficult task. And here's another little example. This is a very famous feature of what certain children do around the age of 5. So if you look at this little diagram, and if I ask you, sorry, let me go back. If I ask you, are all the circles black? Well, you say, of course they are. There are 3 black circles and no white circles. But many children around the age of 5 or 6, when asked this question, say no, because there are 2 black squares. So they interpret the question not to mean are all the circles black, but to mean are all the black things circles, which is a very interesting and unexplained fact. Syntax is about the study of sentences. Moving on now from child language acquisition. So here's a sentence which is a grammatical sentence, except we don't know what it means because there are nonsense words. But we can negate it. We can turn it into a question. We can turn it into another kind of question. We can put in what's called a relative clause here, the blag, the exclude. We can make it into a conjunct sentence and leave out part of the second sentence. And we can do even more complicated things. And we can do this with structures of sentences without knowing what sentences mean, as here with these nonsense words. Okay, let's move on quickly. Historical linguistics is another major part of linguistics, the study of how languages change over time. Why? And in historical linguistics, we look at the relations among languages. So this is a kind of family tree of many of the languages of Europe and parts of Asia. And in fact, the word that you see here each time is the word for horse in all of these various languages. So hippos is the Greek word, and ech is actually the Irish word for horse, and ashvas is the Sanskrit word, and so on. And all of these are related. The root of this tree is a language that was spoken about 4,000 years ago, sorry, about 6,000 years ago, called Proto-Indo-European. And in that language, the original word for horse was something like a horse. So in historical linguistics, we study how languages are related going back many, many centuries. Another thing is the development of writing. I don't really have time to go through this in detail, but most writing systems originated as pictographic script, as little pictures, and then the pictures become stylized into what are called ideograms, which is how the Chinese writing system works. And then in some cases, those develop into alphabets, as of course happened actually in the Middle East. And then the Greeks borrowed the Phoenician alphabet, and that became our alphabet. And we also look at language content, how languages influence one another. There's a very famous example of the French influence on English as concerning words for animals and for the meat from animals. So in English, typically, the word for an animal, for common domestic animals, is a Germanic word like cow or sheep or calf or chicken. But the word for the food that we get from the animal comes from French. So we have beef, which comes from French boeuf, mutton, which comes from French mouton, veal, which comes from French veau, and so on. Okay. Another thing that we study in historical linguistics is multilingualism. So here's an example of a sign from the Caribbean, where we have English, Spanish, which you can probably recognize, and the language in the middle is actually Haitian Creole, based on French. And here's another example of a Creole language from Papua New Guinea. The language is known as Neo-Melanesian, or more informally as Tok Pisin, or Talk Pidgin. And here we see a road sign, which is actually the Creole based on English. So this says, work along road, all cars must stop. Suppose you look in. So if you see red mark, meaning red light, this word pella is impossible to translate. Sociolinguistics, this is actually just about my last slide. How do social factors interact with language? And here we look at variation according to region, or social class, or age, or gender. So just to give an example of regional variation, what do you call these kinds of shoes that you might wear for sport purposes? Well, where I grew up, we called them pumps. But in some parts of the country, they're called plimsolls. And in some parts of the country, they're called daps. You can see here, pumps is the green ones. So it's actually mostly the north and northwest and Midlands. Plimsolls is the southeast and actually the northeast. And they're called daps around Bristol and South Wales. Those are the red dots. So sociolinguistic studies that kind. Okay, and so I think I can stop there and hand over to Alex, who will tell you a little bit about student life here.
Right, so first off, I'd like to talk about why I decided to study linguistics at Cambridge. As Ian mentioned, this is a purely linguistics course. You don't have to study it alongside a foreign language or look at it purely from English linguistics. You can really study linguistics in all its forms in any way you like, and that appealed to me. Also, it doesn't require any specific A-level subjects, which helped me out because I studied maths, further maths, physics and chemistry at A-level. So it meant not only could I apply, but it kind of gives an indication of the interdisciplinary nature of the course, which I found interesting too. And as already mentioned, there's a very wide choice of modules that you can take. First year, it's obligatory, but it does give you a wide foundation and it's a good base to start from. And then in second year and third year, you can choose what you like to study, not only from the linguistics department, but you can also borrow papers from Anglo-Saxon, Norse and Celtic, from classics or from the MML faculty. That's the modern and medieval languages. So lots of choice there. As for what it's actually like studying linguistics, you'll have your lectures, which take place in the lecture block. That's where you get most of your sort of foundation content. But then what you'll spend most of your time working on are the supervisions. And these are 1 hour long. And these are a really good opportunity to really delve in deep to the content. You can read around your subject. You will have your supervisor who is very knowledgeable in that area. You'll have your other students in there too. It's a chance to bounce ideas around and get feedback on work that you'll have submitted in advance. This is usually essays or data analyses. You can also write commentaries. So in LI4, you write commentaries on Old English texts, which is pretty cool. So supervisions are a really great chance to look at the material and are unique to Cambridge as well. As for what you do in your independent study, that's really up to you, but it's usually preparing for supervisions by going over the lecture material, pre-reading for lectures, reading through the reading list for your supervisions. It's also a chance to work with others on your course. There's not usually any group work, but I always find working with others, it makes it go faster and easier as well. As for where you can do this work, there are lots of study spaces, and as a member of a university, you have access to libraries all over the university. So you have the MMLL library, which is the library which will have the most linguistics material there. You also have a library at each of the colleges. The library at Downing is really good. I'm going to talk about that later. There's also the university library, and as a member of the university, you have an online login to loads of journals and other online resources. So there's never a shortage of stuff you can get your hands on to read. And I just like to make a quick point about where all this happens. The lecture block and this building on the right here, which is the raised faculty building, are both on Sidgwick site. This is the humanities site. It's just outside of the centre in Cambridge. It's not too far from Downing, and it's where you have most of your supervisions, I think, at least I did. It's also got other departments there, like classics and so on, so you can bump into other people. It's also got cafes and spaces for working. So it's a nice site to visit every time you need to. As for the linguistics community, we are a very small department. So when you only have about 30 people in your year, you do get to know everyone really well, which is nice. You've got a strong community there. The photos are from a formal that we organised last year. So it's nice to have that support around you. Also, as a small department, I feel as though we are quite listened to by the faculty. So obviously this year has been quite affected by COVID, and requests we've put in for changing the exams and so on have been listened to. So I feel like that's a really strong positive of our department. As for your support, you will have your Director of Studies, which is the person who supervises your sort of academic journey throughout your linguistics course. And you can also ask for advice from your supervisors relevant to that paper that they're supervising you for. Also within the MMLL library, which is the linguistics library I mentioned, they put on loads of events, which are all brilliant. On the academic side, they're always very helpful with referencing, helping you find resources. And also on the welfare side too, they're really lovely. They put on mindfulness workshops and yoga sessions in the library. And they also have bean bags and blankets in the library, which for me is just a win. So it's really great. And one final thing to mention is the Linguistic Society, which shamefully I'm not a member of, so I can't really tell you very much about it, but I do know that they put on weekly talks with guest speakers who are all brilliant. And if you want to learn a bit more about linguistics beyond the course, this is a great way to do that. Right. So now I'll talk a little bit about Downing College and what I think is the greatest college, a little bit biased admittedly. First of all, the location is great. It is pretty central, near to everything you need to be near to, but also just slightly outside of the main centre, so there is a lot more space. It's a very open college. As you saw from the aerial shot at the beginning, there's a lot of greenery, and so it's not got that claustrophobic feel that I personally find in some of the other colleges. Also, it's close to Sidgwick site, where the lecture block and the department is. About 20 minutes walking or 5-10 minutes cycle. And the accommodation is really good. There are various bands in pricing, so you can find something for your budget. And also for the entirety of your undergraduate degree, accommodation is on one site. Between colleges, it kind of varies. Some colleges, perhaps first years, will be all living together on a separate site. I personally like the fact that all years are you'll be living with other first years when you first come, but it's all on one site, so you have more integration between other years, and I like that community field. Also, they have good kitchens, which I personally like cooking, so that's a win for me. There are lots of other great facilities that I'll just run through. There is also food provided in the college as well, which is top-notch. Apparently, Downing brunch is legendary. My friend said that. I can't tell you how accurate that is, but it's also optional, so you don't have to eat in there a certain number of times. You can just turn up whenever you like. And the college library, which I mentioned earlier, is amazing. I can't believe I don't have a photo of it. It's very pretty, and the linguistics section is really good. Within the college, there'll only be a handful of linguistics students, so you will always have the books you need, and it's open 24/7, so if you ever need to work through the night, college is there for you. The college library is there for you, sorry. As Dr. Eunice mentioned earlier, Keith's Cafe is something of a new tradition in college, which is brilliant, where our chaplain Keith sort of puts on free hot chocolate and biscuits and donuts, and the college comes together and has a chat for an hour on a Thursday, and it's something that's I've really missed this year with being away from college. It's a great way to meet other people in different year groups as well. We also have a cafe, which is also a bar in the evening, and downstairs there's sort of like a games room that you can book out for your own use. And we also have the Hyung Gallery, which puts on exhibitions throughout the year, which is free to enter. Nice to take a little bit of time out of your busy day to just look at whatever's going on in there. I think there was a celebrating 40 years of women at Downing recently, which I saw, which is lovely. And we also have the Howard Theatre, which puts on productions throughout the year. There's a gym, and at the boathouse on the river, we also have the rowing tank, which is kind of like an indoor rowing boat in a swimming pool. It's pretty cool if you're interested in trying rowing. And there are the pickleball music rooms and the chapel. All right. So a few things about Cambridge that you might not know about. Matriculation is a word that you hear bandied about should you decide to come quite a lot when you first arrive. It's basically the process of becoming a member of the university. Sounds a little bit mysterious, but all it actually is you have to sign a book, and that's it. And then later in the day of your matriculation, you'll have your year group photo, and also you have a formal meal in the dining hall as well, where you dress up smart and you have a nice meal and you meet your director of studies and other fellows related to your subject. Speaking of formals, they're put on by colleges multiple times per week, I think. It's kind of a Cambridgey nice thing to do where you can have a 3-course sit-down meal. You can invite guests or friends round and you can kind of show them the kind of Cambridgey side of being a student. And each college puts them on so you can visit formals at other colleges as well. And something you will need is a gown, only for matriculation and formals, although I think that actually varies between colleges. You don't need to wear your gown every day when you go to lectures, fortunately. You can if you like, but you will need a gown when you come. Before you first arrive, you will be assigned to a college family, which is a group of students, a couple from the year above and a couple from your year who all take similar subjects. And this is a chance for you to get to know a couple of people before you first arrive. But more importantly, you have people in the year above you can ask your questions to, if you have any worries or anything specific you want to know. And once you're actually in Cambridge, they're there for you as a support network too, which is really nice. As already mentioned, we have 3 terms and they are short compared to other university terms, but they're very, very intense. I usually come home and sleep for about a week straight afterwards. As a result of this, you can't have a job during term time. If money is a worry for you, there are paid opportunities in college. I think you can work in the bar, for example, or do what I do and be a student ambassador, or you can apply for bursaries. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the societies and opportunities you can have if you decide to come to Cambridge. And I mean, there are so many. I'm only scratching the surface here. I would really recommend wherever you decide to study, getting involved in societies. They're a great way to relax and learn new skills. Just to give a few examples of what I've done so far while I've been at Cambridge. I'm on the Taekwondo committee and I compete at national competitions, or I did pre-COVID anyway, and in the annual varsity match against Oxford. I also was a member of the Formula Student Full Blue Racing Team, which is an engineering society where you basically build and race a racing car, which is really cool. And through that, I got to be trained on the lathe machine, which is a skill that I will probably never use again, but is still cool, and I'm glad I did it. Been involved in various sports clubs. Also, the Astronomical Society put on loads of great talks, but you can also learn to use the telescopes. So you can use them in your own time and train to use those and just go up in the observatory whenever you like, which is awesome. Also, Cambridge being the centre of research, there are so many talks that you can go and listen to. You can listen to people who are world leading in their field for so many subjects. It's kind of crazy. I don't really realise sometimes. There's also a career service that can help you looking for internships and your CV advice and that kind of thing. And you can also volunteer for research, which is regularly paid for. So I took part in some PhD research for linguistics, which I got paid for, very nice, but also I could see the kind of research that goes on within linguistics and kind of give me ideas about what I might want to do for my dissertation. So just to wrap up, if you're looking for an academic challenge, a strong community, or top-notch teaching and facilities and epic opportunities, I would definitely recommend applying. I know the application process can seem quite daunting, but honestly, it was a great decision. And well, you can make up your own mind and think if I'm cool or not. But if you have any questions, I'll hand back over to Katrin now. And yeah, we'll be happy to answer them.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And thank you to all the speakers today. I invite everyone back on for the Q&A. And I can see there's lots of questions that have been put in. Thank you very much. And please do submit any others that you have. So let's see where we need to start. Cam, we'll start with this one. How many candidates get accepted? So roughly how many apply and then how many do we accept?
Okay, that can vary year to year. For linguistics, we typically try and make at least 2 offers. Again, what we tend to do at Downing is look at the gathered field across all subjects, and where the candidates are outstanding academically, we try and focus our offers around there. So from year to year, it can vary, but on average, I'd say we make about 2 to 3 offers. But 2 definitely, and sometimes 3 if we've had a good year where we've had really good applicants for the subject. I'm not going to lie, it is very competitive. We get hundreds of applicants. It's a competitive process, but that's the case at every college.
Brilliant, thank you. Ian, there's a question here. Is there an element of literature studies and analysis to the course?
To the linguistics course, no, there isn't. You'll have that if you do modern and medieval languages, but not in linguistics.
Brilliant, thank you. So Cam, do you hear from the university even if you haven't been invited for interview?
So normally we select the candidates that we want to invite by the end of November. If your application is unsuccessful at that point, you will be hearing from the college and they will inform you that your application won't be taken any further at that point. So yes, at the end of November, beginning of December, candidates who haven't been invited will be informed.
Perfect, thank you. Ian, there's a question here. Is there any intersection in the course with sign language and non-verbal linguistics, i.e. the way grammar, syntax, etc. translate when a language is unspoken?
Well, we don't explicitly have a course on sign language, or really, I guess, what one might call more generally non-verbal languages or languages transmitted through modalities other than speech and writing. But it does come up in several different contexts. And it is possible, certainly, to look into that. It could be a good undergraduate dissertation topic, for example. So yeah, we don't explicitly have it, but it's kind of, it pops up here and there. There's no specific course, though, no specific module.
Brilliant, thank you. Alice, a question for you. Is the college family thing common for Cambridge colleges? And what happens if the course is quite small and you end up being one of the only people studying that course?
Yes, that's a good question. I believe it's at every college. It's not specific to Downing. As for linguistics being a small course, so in the year above me, there weren't any linguistics students at Downing. So my college parents, as they're called, weren't linguistics students. They were from a couple of different humanities subjects. So I didn't have a linguistics parent, as it were, but I did have people who I could ask questions that I was worried about college and so on. And also there were linguistics students 2 years above me that I could come to for linguistics specific questions. So being a small course is really not a problem in that sense.
Yeah, they do try and parent you with at least one of your parents being from the same subject if they can. Yeah, brilliant. Cam, you might know the answer to this one, but we might have to pass it to Ian. For the written work, can the written work come from a dropped subject? So I imagine this is a subject they've done at AS, and then not taken it to A level.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Ian. As long as the essay has been marked at the school, that should be fine. We're looking for sort of your writing skills, your communication skills. How do you structure an argument in an essay? How do you structure your essay and bring across a topic that you're trying to discuss? These are the sorts of things we're looking for when we're looking at any submitted work. And what we want to see is how that's been marked at school as well, and what sort of feedback, how you responded to the feedback that you've received from your teachers as well, and look to improve that essay. Is that right, Ian? Is there anything else that
Yeah, that's basically that's correct. Again, it's connected to the fact that linguistics isn't a school subject. So obviously we can't expect schoolwork on linguistics. So we're very open as to what the actual subject matter is.
Brilliant, thank you. There's a question here. How can the students develop their critical skills, as in critical reading and analysis? I guess we'll come to Ian for this one.
Well, I mean, it depends really. To develop critical skills, I would say that almost any kind of factual-based academic pop science reading will be helpful. There are various introductory books to linguistics which you might want to read in advance. Probably the most famous one is a book called The Language Instinct by Steven Pinker. I'll put some references in the chat perhaps so people can see those. And I would recommend looking at a couple of those books at some stage before your interview.
Brilliant, thank you. There's a couple of questions, I guess, based on what you were saying, Ian, in your talk, sort of generally about linguistics. So there's two of them that are sort of similar. So does speaking to babies in a baby voice limit their language development? And then does teaching young children more than one language confuse them, or is it the best time to teach them? So they want to learn more about what you're talking about.
They're both very good questions and much debated. Yeah, I mean, it's probable that speaking to children in some kind of baby talk basically doesn't really make any difference. They seem to just go ahead and learn the language anyway, whatever you do. As far as multilingualism or bilingualism is concerned, there's a big debate about this, which has actually come into every now and then you see something in the media, but there is some evidence that actually exposure to two languages early in life gives a cognitive advantage. And it certainly gives a linguistic advantage. And as you may have seen from those very quick slides I presented, the fact is that children under the age of 5 are all absolutely brilliant linguists. And so exposure to any language will result in them picking the language up very quickly.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, it's probably not easy to give a very short answer. Okay, Iris, question for you. Are there opportunities to learn foreign languages within the course? And then maybe if not in the course, maybe with societies?
Yeah, so within the course, no, at least not if you take linguistics. If you decide to go the modern and medieval languages route, then there'll be languages involved on that. But in terms of societies, definitely, there are, as I mentioned, a whole host in different languages. As for whether they put on actual lessons, I know some do. For example, I know in the signing society, they put on BSL lessons, for example, that was mentioned earlier. And within the department, I think there was a push for a while for people to learn Portuguese. So there are opportunities there, but if you're really looking to learn the language as part of the course, then maybe not linguistics is the best way to do that.
Brilliant, thank you. And for Cam, people wanting to go the medieval and modern languages route, do they need to have an A-level in a language to do that course?
I think so. I think you need to be doing at least one A-level subject in a language, which you're going to be sort of learning about on the MML course. So yes, there is a requirement for that. Again, do look at the college websites where there'll be more information about the entry requirements, because some colleges may have slightly different requirements.
Brilliant. Eilist, is Downing considered one of the smaller colleges, would you say?
I think it's probably slightly larger than average. It's pretty average, maybe slightly bigger than average in terms of the number of students, I think. I'm not really sure. I'm seeing nodding. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Downing is considered, it's one of the larger colleges. We have a fairly large intake. We look to admit around 125 to 130 students each academic year. It's one of the newest of the older colleges, but it's a fairly large college, yeah.
Yeah, and we take around 120 new students each year. Okay, we're down to the last couple of questions. Ian, you were talking about careers in your section. Does linguistics have links to journalism?
Well, links, yeah, I mean, certainly a degree in linguistics is probably advantageous, or it's a good way into journalism, because obviously journalism is all about language, and through linguistics you learn a lot about language. And so I think you probably learn to think more carefully and more analytically about how you actually construct your sentences and paragraphs as you write. And so that is obviously an advantage. So in that sense, there's a connection. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. The last couple of questions are for you, Cam. How does the college manage deferrals? So if people need to do sort of like army years in service, or they want to do gap years and things like that.
So we often get applicants, especially if they're overseas, wanting to defer due to mandatory military service. It's absolutely fine. We have admitted students in the past which have requested deferred entry for up to 2 years because they were coming through from Singapore and had to do military service. It's really important that you stipulate that on your application. The only thing I would also add to that is I'd always encourage students to, if they are definitely going to be making a deferred entry, is to consider applying the year before their military service is about to finish, if that's an option for them. But if that isn't, then yes, definitely apply and your application will be considered.
Brilliant, thank you. We may have already mentioned this, but how many candidates are invited to interview roughly?
So again, that can vary subject to subject. Typically, we would interview around 80% of the applicants which have applied to us, but that can change year to year. I can't emphasize this enough. Every application is evaluated on an individual basis. We look at a number of set criteria to make a decision about how we want to proceed with that applicant. And if all our applicants are academically outstanding and meet all those criteria, tick all the boxes, they will all get interviewed, you know. So there is no kind of hard and fast rule that we must deselect a certain proportion of candidates. We invite people to interview who we think are looking very strong as a competitive applicant, and we want to explore their application further with them.
Brilliant. And a last question that's just come in, Ian, because we were just talking about kind of links to different subjects. They're asking whether linguistics has any links to law.
Well, actually, again, it's kind of the same answer. There is actually a little subfield of linguistics that deals with legal language. It's not, again, we don't have a module specifically about that. It comes up in various places. If you look at many legal judgments, what you'll see is that very often the questions that are that judgments turn on are questions of interpretation of language. So it's, what does this sentence mean? How could we interpret this sentence? And so again, knowledge of how language works is always going to be an advantage. And many of our undergraduates do actually go on to do a law conversion course and then go into legal careers. That is quite a common, I didn't mention it actually, but that is quite a common career path.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, that's all the questions. So all that's left for me to do is to say a massive thank you to Cam, to Ian and to Eilish for their time this afternoon and for their talks. If you have any questions that you think of after today's webinar, please do email them to me. You should already have my email, but it's access@dow.cam.ac.uk, and I'll be sending out the recording to you in the next week. When you close the webinar today, it's going to send you to a feedback form. Please do fill out the feedback form and let us know how you found it. But otherwise, thank you very much to the panelists and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.